It started as something small, something easy to dismiss. The kind of thing adults laugh off and children never think to question. 8-year-old Oliver Hayes had always been quiet, the kind of child who preferred corners over crowds, imagination over conversation. After his family moved into the old house at the edge of Alder Street, that quiet turned into something else, something deeper, more focused. His parents noticed first in the evenings. Oliver would sit on the floor of his room, legs crossed, speaking softly as if someone sat directly across from him. At first it sounded like pretend play, a child inventing voices, stories, invisible friends. But there was something different about the way Oliver spoke. He paused, as if listening. Not the kind of pause children make when they forget what to say next, but the kind that suggests someone else has spoken first. "No," he whispered one night, his voice carrying faintly through the hallway. "I won't tell them." His mother stood outside his door, hand hovering over the handle, unsure whether to interrupt or walk away. When she finally opened it, Oliver turned toward her slowly, his expression calm, too calm. "Who are you talking to?" she asked gently. Oliver blinked once, then pointed toward the empty space behind her. "Him." She turned instinctively. Nothing, just the dim hallway and the soft hum of the house settling into the night. When she looked back, Oliver had already returned his gaze to the floor. "He says you shouldn't listen at doors," he added quietly. That was the first moment something felt wrong. Not frightening, not yet, but wrong in a way that didn't fit into anything familiar. Because imagination does not warn you about things it cannot see. Over the next few days, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Oliver wasn't just talking, he was having conversations. Long ones, detailed ones. His tone changed depending on what he heard, shifting from curiosity to frustration, from quiet agreement to firm refusal. Sometimes he laughed softly, as if responding to something amusing. Other times, he grew still, listening with an intensity that made his parents uneasy. "What does he look like?" his father asked one afternoon, trying to keep his voice light. Oliver didn't answer immediately. He stared past him, as if checking whether the question had been approved. Then he said, "He doesn't like that question." A pause. "But he says he looks like someone you forgot." That answer stayed with his father longer than he cared to admit, because it wasn't something a child typically says. It wasn't playful, it wasn't random, it felt deliberate. The first real incident happened on the 5th night. Oliver's mother woke to the sound of movement in the hallway. Slow, measured footsteps. She assumed it was her husband at first, until she reached out and felt him asleep beside her. The footsteps continued, stopping just outside Oliver's room. Then came a voice, not Oliver's, not loud, not clear enough to form words, but undeniably present. She sat up, her heart pounding as she listened. The voice spoke again, low, steady, answering something. And then, Oliver responded. When she rushed to his door and pushed it open, the room was exactly as it should be. Oliver sitting on the floor, alone, the air still, silent. "Did you hear that?" she asked, breath unsteady. Oliver looked at her with mild confusion. "Hear what?" Then, after a brief pause, he smiled faintly. "Oh, you mean him." The way he said it, casual, almost amused, made the silence that followed feel heavier than any sound. By the end of the week, the house itself seemed to change. Not physically, nothing obvious, nothing that could be pointed to or explained, but the atmosphere shifted in a way that made even daylight feel uncertain. Rooms felt occupied when they were empty. Hallways seemed longer at night. And Oliver became quieter. Not withdrawn, but focused. As if his attention belonged somewhere else. His parents tried to rationalize it. Stress from the move, overactive imagination, a need for adjustment. But rational explanations began to collapse under the weight of repetition. Every night, at nearly the same time, Oliver would begin speaking again, and every night, the pauses between his words grew more precise, as if the responses he received were becoming clearer. On the 7th night, his father decided to stay awake. He sat in the hallway outside Oliver's room, listening. At first, there was only silence. Then Oliver's voice, soft but distinct. "No," he said.
"We need to
They're
talk
still
about
here."
this.
A pause.
I know,
longer
but not
this
now.
time. His father
When then?
leaned closer to the door, every sense sharpened. And then, something answered. This time, it wasn't a murmur. It wasn't distant. It was close. close enough that he felt it rather than heard it, a presence pressing against the space on the other side of the door. His breath caught. The voice spoke again, low and measured, its tone carrying a weight that didn't belong in a child's room. He couldn't make out the words, but he understood something far more important. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't Oliver pretending. Something was there, something that could respond. When he finally opened the door, the conversation stopped instantly. Oliver looked up, his expression unreadable. "You weren't supposed to listen," he said. Not accusing, not afraid, just stating a fact. His father stepped into the room slowly, scanning every corner. Nothing, no one, just his son. And yet, the air felt wrong, thicker, as if something had been pushed aside rather than removed. "Who is it?" he asked quietly. Oliver hesitated. For the first time since this began, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then he whispered, "He says you already know." That answer did not bring clarity. It brought something worse. Because knowing something, without understanding it, is where fear truly begins. The decision to seek help came the following morning, though neither parent admitted it out loud. They spoke around it, through it, as if naming the problem would give it more weight than they were ready to carry. A child psychologist was suggested, then dismissed. A doctor, a counselor. None of it felt right, because none of it accounted for what they had both experienced the night before. This wasn't just Oliver, this was something else, something that existed outside of explanation. That night, they kept Oliver with them. No doors closed, no lights off. They stayed in the living room, pretending it was a choice rather than a necessity. Oliver seemed amused. Not openly, not in a way that invited attention, but there was a subtle shift in his behavior, as if he understood something they didn't, as if he had expected this. "He doesn't like when I'm not in my room," Oliver said casually, playing with a small wooden figure in his hands. His mother stiffened. "Who?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Oliver glanced toward the hallway, his eyes following something invisible. "Him," he replied simply. The lights flickered once, not dramatically, not enough to draw immediate alarm, but enough to be noticed. His father stood slowly, scanning the room. "Probably the wiring," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Oliver shook his head. "No," he said softly. "He's closer now." The words settled into the room like a weight, heavy, unavoidable, and then, for the first time, it happened in front of them. A sound, clear, distinct, a voice, not loud, not shouting, but unmistakable. It came from the hallway, and it wasn't Oliver speaking. The reaction was immediate, instinctive. His mother pulled Oliver closer, her hands trembling as she tried to steady her breath. His father moved toward the hallway, each step slower than the last, as if the distance between him and the sound had somehow expanded. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice firm but strained. No answer, just silence. Then Oliver spoke. Not to them, but to the space beyond. "You're not supposed to talk to them," he said quietly. A pause, and then the voice returned, this time clearer. Not a whisper, not a distortion. Words, real words, low, calm, controlled. He shouldn't have listened. The sentence hung in the air, sharp and precise. His father stopped moving. Every instinct told him to retreat, but something stronger kept him in place. "What do you want?" he asked, forcing the question out despite the fear tightening in his chest. The answer came after a moment. "To be remembered." The simplicity of it made it worse, because it wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was something far more unsettling, intent. Oliver's grip tightened on his mother's arm. "I told you," he whispered. "He talks back now." The room felt smaller, the walls closer, as if the presence in the hallway wasn't just occupying space, but reshaping it. His father stepped back slowly, returning to the living room without turning his back on the darkness. The voice did not follow, but it didn't disappear either. It remained just beyond reach, waiting, watching, and understanding something they did not. That once something answers back, it is no longer just listening. The truth revealed itself not through confrontation, but through memory. Later that night, As the house settled into an uneasy silence, Oliver spoke again. Not in conversation, but in explanation. "He lived here before us," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on nothing. "A long time ago." His parents listened, unable to interrupt, unable to look away. "No one talks about him," Oliver continued. "No one remembers." A pause. So he stayed. The pieces began to align, not clearly, not completely, but enough to form a shape. A presence tied to the house, not random, not passing, rooted, waiting. "Why you?" his mother asked, her voice barely audible. Oliver shrugged slightly. "He says I listen better." The simplicity of that answer carried a weight far beyond its words. Because listening is an invitation, and something had accepted it. "What does he want from you?" his father asked carefully. Oliver hesitated. For the first time, fear touched his expression. Not panic, not terror, but awareness. "He wants me to keep talking," he said, "so he doesn't disappear again." Silence followed, not empty, but full of understanding. Because now they knew. This wasn't about haunting. It wasn't about fear. It was about existence. About something that refused to fade, because someone had finally heard it. The house remained quiet after that. No more voices, no more responses. But the silence felt different now. Not peaceful, not safe, just waiting. Because some things don't need to speak constantly to be present. Some things only need to know that they can. And somewhere in that house, beyond sight but not beyond awareness, something remained. Not gone, not finished, just listening.